Founder of the Eden Project, Sir Tim Smit, attended a conference on Friday which explored the economic opportunities for the Isle of Man through its strong cultural and business links with the north of England. The event was a joint initiative by the Isle of Man Chamber of Commerce and the Northern Powerhouse Partnership. Sir Tim Smit's involvement in the conference was as a result of an announcement that Eden Project Morecambe is to receive £50 million in funding from the UK government's Levelling Up Fund. I asked Sir Tim what is the new Eden Project and how might it benefit the Isle of Man.
I was the creator of the Eden Project in the far southwest in Cornwall, which was, the project was to take an old abandoned clay mine of 34 acres and turn it into an absolute paradise. My belief, my catchphrase was, "Give me your poison," because the symbolism of taking poisoned land and creating life in it, because we had to create 90,000 tons of soil out of nothing, because it was a completely sterile surface, as you can imagine, with a clay mine. And then we created these amazing conservatories inside it, which are the biggest conservatories on Earth, in which we, by and large, our aspiration was to bring together the world's greatest collection of plants useful to humankind, and then invite people in and use them as a canvas on which to tell the human stories of our dependence on the natural world. But I always wanted it to be a bit rock and roll. I also wanted the explanations about what we were doing to have a mixture of humour, culture, education in the widest sense, because I was fed up of seeing education done to people. We're going to educate you. Read this. This will be important. People don't remember all that sort of stuff. I like to seduce people so that they get educated, that's the right word, by just being amused. And that beguiles them and takes them on a journey.
And there's about to be a new Eden Project in the northwest of England.
That's right. There's a new one on the beach. We will be building a new one on the beach. For those of you who know Morecambe in the northwest of Lancashire, there is a very fine Art Deco hotel on the beach called the Midland, and right next to it there used to be a huge Lido, and that's been covered up and it's been unused for Lord knows how many years. So we're taking about an 8-acre site and we're going to build what is variously called Eden North or Eden Morecambe. But to fire your imagination, imagine mussel shells, but made of solid silver, lying as if they'd been roughly thrown on the sand quite close together, and that'll give you a good idea of what it's like. And the reason we're going to Morecambe, there are many reasons, but by far the largest is that it is a unique destination where you're looking out over Morecambe Bay, which, as all listeners will know, was the site of a very tragic accident in the 1980s with the Chinese cockle pickers. But behind the story of that is, of course, that you're looking at the most extraordinary natural feature, a bay that is very shallow and enormous, that has a tidal race that is faster than a horse can gallop, and huge biodiversity. It's also home, it's like a Heathrow for birds, and you can stand on the beach there and see this extraordinary tidal race, and you then look up to the heavens a bit and you see the hills and peaks of the Lake District, and you see weather systems just forming. So that gave us the idea of building on the beach there something which was about the rhythms of life, the rhythms of the seasons, the day, the rhythms of the human body, and so on. So what we're doing is creating inside those, if you like, those mussel shells, we're creating ways of looking at the natural world in a way that you will never have thought of before. But the essential ambition is to put people in sensory positions where they suddenly realize they're creaturely, just like everything else they're looking at, and thereby to learn to feel an empathy for other creatures and so on. I'm phrasing it a little bit in a sort of hippy-dippy way, but I fundamentally believe that our relationship to nature and our taking responsibility for it can only come from us actually suddenly realizing that it's essential to us, in the old-fashioned sense of the word, essential. So we're very excited about it.
And how does any of this tie in with where you are now, the Isle of Man?
Well, this is my first visit to the marvellous Isle of Man. I've had a whistle-stop tour of the islands, and we're sitting here, obviously, in a hotel where we've been talking with a whole bunch of businesses on the island about the future of the Isle of Man and the prospect of considering what the next 30 years might hold. And my position here was that I was challenging by saying the problem is if you have a culture that is self-referential the whole time, you become provincial and you think that change is something that should go little by little by little. And I think the challenges we're all going to be facing over the next 30 years are basically asking a lot of questions of us about whether we're a species in decline because we're not able to adapt and have actually become like rabbits in the headlights, or have we got the ability to become the next civilization without having to destroy ourselves first? And what I've been saying about the Isle of Man is that I could imagine us, if Isle of Man was brave enough, partnering with us at the Eden Project in Morecambe and becoming, if you like, the island nation biodiverse state part of what Eden is. Because the way the world is going, measuring everything through, as you know, this lovely little country has got, I think, the fastest broadband in the world now coming in from here, and you've got a SpaceX site and everything else. Well, you can be measuring the biodiversity, the ecological traits of the islands and get a real head start on everybody else if you committed yourself to it. And I believe that a strategy which goes towards becoming energy independent with renewables, food independent by really championing farming and growing things, and really concerned about enhancing the biodiversity that is here, could make the Isle of Man the hottest property, the Singapore of Europe. A part of the issue is to believe it. We're so used to being marketed to that you think it's some slogan from some fat cat, as opposed to strategically, why aren't we brave enough to talk to our fellow Manxians and say, we're not sure, but we think this might be the way to go? Because I would not be in the least bit surprised to find out that grown-up citizens of the Isle of Man might well surprise you with what they would like their future to be. They might well really like to commit to a future that still remains ours to make, where one is ahead of the curve rather than following one.
Chief Minister Alf Cannon welcomed Sir Tim Smit's comments and is keen to strengthen links with the northwest of England.
Well, we've been looking to build the relationship with the northwest since I became Chief Minister, both at a political level with the regional mayors, with Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham particularly, but also with the Northern Powerhouse. And I've been working with Henry Murison now for the last 18 months or so in terms of understanding what the Northern Powerhouse is about and how the Isle of Man might shape itself to be part of that. And once Henry Murison, the chief executive, was here at our government conference in September, I think the Chamber of Commerce have picked up on that, have invited him over, and I took that opportunity also then to invite Adam Beaumont and Sir Tim Smit from the Eden Project to add some further value to those discussions and also recognise some of the potential values that we could get from the relationship. So there's really three critical points. There's the tangible here and now in terms of tourism, in terms of the manufacturing links that we already have, a greater understanding how finance can be part of growth and regeneration in the north and northwest, what future programmes we could be part of. Second part of that is learning, just understanding, sharing advances in technology, for example, or latest techniques when it comes to construction. And then thirdly is about future vision and building a more secure, sustainable island. And I think Sir Tim Smit, who's been here this afternoon from the Eden Project, has really painted a bit of a picture about how we could really go about and create a much more sustainable island, almost our own, build out more on the UNESCO platform that we have, really build the Isle of Man biosphere around self-production of food and agriculture, and talk about that in terms of the whole circular economy. There's an absolute tangible value. We've already recognised that at breakfast this morning when we talked about how we could be mutually part of the sort of attraction of tourists, both to the Eden Project and onward, one would hope, as part of visiting the Eden Project, to Biosphere Isle of Man. The ferry terminals are potentially 20 minutes away from when it comes to Heysham, or 45 minutes away when it comes to Liverpool. There's also air links, but broadly, how could we be part of that, sharing mutually their business plans to attract tourists and how those tourists can come on with the Isle of Man, and vis-a-vis how tourists of the Isle of Man could also, on their way home, perhaps stop off and visit the Eden Project. So that's an absolute tangible. but beyond and around that, we can also build and further develop our links and our understanding, both of from an environmental perspective, and also then build not just on the Eden project, but our greater links with the Northern Powerhouse as we look for future energy security, how we build the renewables on the island that we want, what we need to do in terms of accessing, if we need base renewables from the UK, how they might work, but also learning from each other in terms of advancing technologies and how we can make the best use of our natural resources to further progress and build a better society in the future.
Henry Murison is Chief Executive of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership. He tells us a bit about the partnership and how it might benefit the Isle of Man.
So I think what's interesting about the Northern Powerhouse was, as you allude to, when Theresa May became Prime Minister, even uttering the phrase was controversial with some of her advisors. I think what has happened, though, is that the business community of the north of England took ownership of this concept. We now have our northern leaders, the Metro mayors, obviously Andy Burnham in Greater Manchester, Steve Rotherham in the Liverpool City region, and along with mayors across in West Yorkshire, in South Yorkshire, in the Tees Valley, in the North East. They are a huge counterweight now in the British political system. And one of the key ingredients of Jim O'Neill's sort of recipe for the Northern Powerhouse was always devolution. And in the last UK budget, which obviously followed a much more exciting fiscal event here on the island a month before, what we saw was the granting of what are called these kind of single pots. So that's a big move forward for the north of England to have that degree of financial autonomy, but also the retention of business rates. And now again, compared to here on the Isle of Man, those may seem like relatively modest forms of fiscal independence, but for the north of England it is transformational. And it demonstrates a very similar spirit, which is that the independence which has defined this part of the world's past and will define its future is something that I think we share in terms of spirit in the north of England. I mean, Eden North is one of the projects we welcome most strongly from the Levelling Up Fund. Some of the things it funded, like money for prosperous market towns like Melton Mowbray, also famous for its pork pies, we were less supportive of. So I think the challenge for government is that most of those levelling up projects were quite small. They only received about £20 million. Eden North was more than double that, 50 million, and it was one of only two of those very significant projects that received that level of funding. And that's important because that project is also going to leverage in private investment and charitable donations via the Eden Trust, which more than doubles that investment. And so that leverage is really important, that just spending 20 million in any place doesn't make a big difference. And it doesn't necessarily change the fundamentals of an economy. I think Eden North will have a huge impact on Morecambe. I think if it's done correctly with those improved transport links as well, in time, that it will benefit more areas. It certainly benefits the Lake District and gives people something to do when it rains, because like here on the Isle of Man, it does sometimes rain, particularly in the off-season. So I think there's a huge opportunity for the Isle of Man to also benefit, and we've talked today to the Steam Packet Company about those links in both directions. How can we get visitors for Eden North and those going there for a holiday to think about coming to the Isle of Man, and vice versa for those visitors who already are considering a trip to the Isle of Man? How can a visit to Morecambe be added? And it puts to end that long-standing traditional tourism rivalry between Morecambe and the Isle of Man from their times as places for people from the northwest to holiday to, and sees genuinely that collaborative opportunity to bring together those tourism economies and grow the scale of the prize. Adam Beaumont, obviously a prominent northern industrialist from the other side of the Pennines, some would say the correct side of the Pennines, from Yorkshire, has been a long-standing investor in this place and is a part of the local business community. And businesses like Orsted, who are very prominent in the north of England, including across in Grimsby, are now here trying to develop projects. So what I see are the opportunities to strengthen those links, particularly around energy and net zero. I'm really confident that as we seek to deliver a small modular reactor fleet across the north of England, across the wider UK, in particular in England and Wales, Scottish Government still not huge supporters of nuclear, I believe that will provide opportunities to provide the baseload power that the Isle of Man will need. So moving to more sustainable forms of energy generation, particularly your own offshore wind, for example, I think is the right decision. But having that baseload coming from a sustainable source, which would be what an SMR would represent, I think gives the Isle of Man the chance to benefit from the positive things happening in the north of England, but still very much do what's in its own financial and environmental interests. And that, for me, is about aligning the opportunities that we have and the demands you have, and vice versa, doing the same. And I think many of the SMEs in the room also felt that they maybe already did a lot of business in the north of England and could see the opportunities for doing more. Research by the Centre of Cities showed that the cost of living crisis was hitting towns like Burnley worse than it was hurting other places. And we're really clear that what we need to do is address the causes of that, the fact that we have such poor public transport, people are more dependent on the private car outside of our larger cities, and the fact that often people are living in homes that aren't well insulated. And the challenge is that because people in the north of England earn £8,000 a year less than people in London, they're automatically more exposed because we have more people, unfortunately, living in poverty in particularly in some of our larger cities. Manchester, despite its huge success as a council area, is still the 6th most deprived in England. So we are really focused on the transformational economic change the North needs. And we see the Isle of Man as being part of that shared destiny, because if we can work together on those issues where we have mutual shared interests, we can capture benefits for both sides that otherwise wouldn't be there. And having met and talked to so many leading colleagues here in the financial and services sector, but also in the wider economy, I'm really convinced that there are those credible opportunities for better collaboration. And obviously, some of those examples like tourism are almost a no-brainer. And obviously, Manchester Airport, already a long-haul hub, not just for the north of England, but could be that for the Isle of Man, enabling people not to have to necessarily rely on those scarce Heathrow slots. We heard from Logan Air about how difficult it is for them to get more connectivity to Heathrow. We want to get more flights to Manchester Airport, no trouble with that at all. And with the new terminal being built there, it'll be completed in a few years, the opportunity for a seamless experience that we heard about from representatives of the airport, enabling people to transfer without having to collect their bags onto Emirates, onto Ethiopian, for example, to get to South Africa, obviously a popular destination with some of the business links that are here, but also across to the States in the long run, more and more. And I'm really, really positive that with the flight, for example, by Aer Lingus, which is now available from Manchester, that we will see many more of those long-haul links benefiting people on the Isle of Man and preventing that the constrained capacity we have to Heathrow getting in the way of the Isle of Man's international links. Obviously, going to Ireland is always one option, particularly for travel to the States, but we're really clear that Manchester can offer the same or better, particularly to Asia, where more naturally it has got those really significant flights already and has been developing more routes, like to China, I think are important, not only for bringing inbound visitors, but also for outbound trade. And whatever relationship we have with China, we aren't going to be closing the doors economically. And that's really important, that the Isle of Man and the north of England can collaborate on those sorts of agendas.
David Morris is MP for Morecambe and Lunesdale and was instrumental in winning the funding for the New Eden project. You must be over the moon at the fact that that rather derelict-looking site on the front in Morecambe is about to have a new Eden project.
I'm absolutely elated. I became the MP for Morecambe 13 years ago. The catalyst for the area was a link road. I secured then the first road to be built with public funds, which was then about 120 to 30 million pounds, and it just opened up the area. In fact, that's what brought Eden to Morecambe, because we're the quickest route from the M6 anywhere in the country to the seaside. And of course, the old Lido site, as we know it as, that's going to be the new Eden site, and it's fantastic. It was a hard sell to government, but we did it in the end, and we got the single biggest allocation of levelling up funding for one area, for one town in the whole country. So, I can remember when I stood up in Parliament, and I've been laughed at very many times for suggesting an Eden project in Morecambe, in the middle of a town by the sea, in the north of England. It didn't capture anyone's imagination in government, but I had the last laugh in the end, and, we had the Prime Minister to announce it only a few weeks ago. It's all good stuff for Morecambe.
And anyone who's visited the project in Cornwall, but even if you haven't, you must have heard the press, the media coverage about the place, will know what a fantastic facility it is and how big an impact this has had on the local economy.
Well, it has, and talking of the local economy and the impact, we've not even had a shovel in the ground yet, but the Winter Gardens, which is an old Victorian theatre, directly opposite the Eden site, has just been allocated $3 million to finish it off, to be restored. These amounts of money are absolutely mind-blowing compared to where it was, 13 years ago. It's really nice to hear people say to me, Morecambe has changed in the past 10 years. I'd like to think I've had a play in that. I live there myself, and when you see it every day, you don't see the changes happening unless you take a picture every day and look back through them. But there's a good feeling about the place, and one thing that I picked up when I've been here many times, but I think it's time we sort out a proper terminal ourselves. Liverpool's done one, so I think it's time that Heysham had one as well, and I think I can probably get some government funding for that somewhere along the way, and that's something I intend to really pursue when I go back.
Which is excellent news, I'm sure, for anyone who's arrived early for the boat in Heysham. They would be delighted to hear that. I mean, for most people from the Isle of Man, they will know probably two things about Morecambe. One is that it's close to Heysham, if they do use the boat, and two, of course, the one of the most famous TT riders, John McGuinness, comes from Morecambe. But what how do you think that links between the two areas can actually develop from the likes of the conference we've just had?
Well, Tim Smit's here. He's is a visionary, and he articulates a vision of the future. And he's talking with the government at the moment to look at like a unique biosphere of the Isle of Man itself. I think there is a lot of mileage in that, to be truthful. I do think that whilst we're looking at how things are changing in mainland UK, shall we say, my side of the pond, I think that we could all benefit from that, hence how we can have more closer links. I think the days of having a revival seaside resort, Douglas and Morecambe, are way in the past. We're now a smaller world, and we've got to embrace that. And, I love coming here, I've got to say. I actually do feel at home here. So, I think that it's only right that we do have closer ties, and if it's anything to do with me, we will have closer ties.
And in terms of the Northern Powerhouse, I mean, this was a pet project of a former Chancellor of the UK government. Said former Chancellor is now long distance in the sort of the political still of the UK. Is there still any sort of impetus behind the Northern Powerhouse?
We do still have, believe it's not, a powerhouse minister of sorts, levelling up minister. It's different in the context of when George Osborne envisaged it. In fact, at one point, I was actually tipped to be that powerhouse minister. And I'm being the prima donna. Arguably, I would have been the best. However, we are where we are, and I think that what George did was open up a debate and discussion of how things could be. And it certainly worked in my area, I've got to say that. I mean, I remember George very well. I'm still friendly with him now, and he helped me and my people in Morecambe immeasurably, especially with that link road. And
in terms of the Isle of Man's involvement with the Northern Powerhouse, obviously we're not part of the United Kingdom. How does that work for us?
In the respect of being part of the Northern Powerhouse initiative, I think you're right in the technical aspects of it, but the Isle of Man and Heysham are very, very intrinsically linked, and the fortunes do reflect one another's. And I think that it doesn't matter if you're not technically part of the UK. You are, in effect, because it's a small world. We are very close together, and we do depend on one another quite a lot. And I think, what's good for the Isle of Man is certainly good for Morecambe, and I think vice versa, especially the northwest region.
The ambition to replicate the success of the Eden project in Cornwall with the new site in Morecambe is expected to attract thousands of visitors. But will this have a spin-off effect for us in the Isle of Man? Is there a real economic opportunity here, or is it all just pie in the sky? Let me know your thoughts on the programme by contacting Phil Gorn at manxradio.com and get in touch if you have any ideas for future shows. Don't forget, this programme is available as a podcast on Manx Radio's website. For now, though, I'm Phil Gorn. Goramayo. Thanks for listening.